Ladies and gentlemen of the press, um, called this press conference in order to clarify where we are today. Yesterday, I did give an interview with the media and said that today, the 35th anniversary of Saba Saba, I was going to go to Kamkunji to join other Kenyans in commemorating this very important day. Unfortunately, as you all know, circumstances, today the roadblocks all over town, which has made it difficult for people to move to Kamkunji. In the circumstances, I've decided therefore to talk to the media here at Serena. Some of you may not know fully the history of Saba Saba. As you know that Kenya attained independence in 1963, and at that time it was a multi-party system. There are three political parties: KANU, KADU, and then APP. But after a very short period of time, those two other opposition political parties, because KANU had won the elections and formed the government, and the two other parties were in the opposition, they were folded up and joined KANU. And KANU remained the only political party. However, in 1966, an opposition party was formed called the Kenya People's Union. This party survived for 3 years, and it was banned by the government in 1969. And the leadership of the party were arrested and taken to political detention. From that time onwards, Kenya remained a de facto single-party dictatorship from 1969 to 1982. 1982, when some of us wanted to form a political party, the regime then went to parliament and introduced a law to make the country a single party state de jure by introducing a constitutional amendment which is known as Section 2A that made it illegal to form any other political party. So from 1982, it remained literally a single-party dictatorship. That is the reason why in that same year there was a coup attempt which did not succeed. But before that, a number of Kenyans were arrested and taken to political detention. Most of them were lecturers at the University of Nairobi. Mukarunganga, people like Professor Katama Mukangi, Professor Willy Mutunga, Dr. Professor Yugi Akongo, quite a number of university lecturers were arrested and detained, and the others, Koigo Omwere, George Anyona, were taken to political detention. So this situation persisted. Some of us were arrested in that year, 1982, after the coup attempt, and taken to political detention. We stayed there for 6 years. Then in 1988, KANU brought an amendment to his laws, saying that they are bringing what they call direct democracy. where there was a nomination process. People were lining up behind the candidates. And then the returning officer would count the voters who had lined up behind the candidates. And whoever got the highest number of votes, if you got more than 50% in total, you are automatically declared a member of parliament without having to go to the ballot. That process was abused, and many popular candidates were rigged at that stage, and therefore there was no real proper election in 1988. This now added momentum, anger to the movement for change. Among those people who had been rigged out were Kenneth Matiba and Charles Rubia. So, come 1990, by that time I had been to detention 2 times. The 2 politicians, Kenneth Matiba and Charles Rubia, on the 2nd of May 1990, addressed a press conference. They said that Kenya, the time had come for Kenya to become a multi-party. That Kenyans wanted a multi-party system of government. They were condemned seriously as being ethnic chauvinists, anarchists, people who want to bring chaos in this country. Told that this country was not yet cohesive enough to become multi-party. So it would take another 100 years before Kenya became a multi-party system. These were daydreamers. So the kind of machinery at that time set off now to demonize the 2 members of parliament, the 2 former members of parliament. And in the process, of course, a number of very inflammatory statements were made, even by some today politicians who are talking about democracy here. You go into the archives, you see their names and what they said at that time. So in the process, Kenneth Matiba came to look for me to arrange for a meeting between him and Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who is my father. I arranged the meeting, and then we met again. They met again with Sarubia, Toneko, and after lengthy deliberations, the decision was taken that they would be supported. At that same time, they sent the goons to Matiba's home the following day to attack his family. Matiba's wife was very badly wounded, Edith, and she was admitted to Nairobi Hospital, where we went to see her. After that, we, myself and Kenneth Matiba and Charles Rubia made a statement which we said we would go to Kamkunji to ask Kenyans if they were ready for multi-party. And we do it on the day of the 7th of July, that year, 1990. 7th of July, 1990. So after making that statement, we then now went on to mobilize for the meeting at Kamkunji. But then, of course, the police officers came to block us from meeting each other. We were stationed in my office at Ajip House, Matiba's office, up there on Koinange Street, and Rubia's office, and Paul Mitch's, and Gibson Kamal Korea's. On the 2nd of July, 1990, Matiba and Rubia were arrested and taken to detention. On the 4th of July, I was arrested and taken to detention. That same night, they arrested Gitobu Manyara. They arrested John Hameno. They arrested now Justice Mohammed Ibrahim. Paul Mwite went into hiding. Kamau Korea ran into American embassy and sought refuge. Kyoto Murungi was in Ethiopia and went to America. But that's how it was. But the International Commission of Jurists came up and made a very powerful lobby for the release of Hamenwa and Manyara, and they were released. As we remained in detention. And as you know, Rubia is the one who was first affected. He got a very serious infection. He was taken to hospital. Eventually, he nearly lost his vocal cords and was released. Matiba suffered a stroke in detention and was removed and eventually brought to Nairobi Hospital, after which she was then taken to London for treatment. That completely undermined his health permanently. And these two people eventually died because of not old age at that time, but because of the injuries they sustained while in detention. Many people, but in spite of our being detained, the Kenyan people braved it and came out in numbers to go to Kamkunji on the 7th of July, 1990. Many people were killed attempting to reach Kamkunji grounds that time. So then, after we came out of detention, then Ford was formed. We formed Ford. After forming Ford, again we get pressed and said we were going back to Kamkunji. Eventually, when I was targeted again, I was moved away from here and taken into exile. But our people braved it and managed to march all the way into Kamkunji. And you'll see the photograph in front page of Nation there today. You can see Martin Chikuku, James Orengo, Nyang Nyongo, Masinde Muliro in the back of that truck getting up to Kamkunji. That was not on Saba Saba, that was on the 16th of November 1991. But it's still the Kamkunji. That's why Kamkunji is very historical, the second liberation of this country. And that's why we celebrate Saba Saba. The fateful day on which Kenya's struggle for multi-party democracy took the most decisive turn is iconic and historical. It's a day rivaled only by the present day Masuja Day, previously Kenyatta Day, that celebrates the arrest and detention of the freedom fighters jointly called the Kapenguria Six. It is regrettable that the recognition and remembrance of Saba Saba has not been consistent in its short period history of 35 years. One moment it is important. The next moment it is not. On this 35th anniversary of Saba Saba, we decided to remember and to set the record straight on its significance, what it was and is, and what we ought to do with the foundation it laid for the country. Before that day, some patriotic Kenyans had demanded the repeal of Section 2A of the Constitution. A number of people, including Kenneth Matiba, Raila Odingas, Mohamed Ibrahim, Toby Manyara, John Hamino, and Charles Rubia, among others, were arrested and detained. It is quite unfortunate that some of the people we were fighting then and who sanctioned those arrests are trying to hide behind Saba Saba to advance their political fortunes. Some of them are alive today and now are masquerading as liberators. On the fateful day, July 7, 1990, thousands of Kenyans tried to gather at the historic Kamkunji grounds to take stock of the past, the state of the nation, and chart a path of freedom forward. We decided that Saba Saba would be a march for political freedom and liberty, freedom of association, freedom of movement, freedom of expression, and a new democratic constitution founded on multipartyism. Kenyans wanted a fulfillment of the Kenyan dream, which was eradication of poverty, ignorance, disease, and good governance. That clarity of mission is what made Saba Saba different from all other confrontations with the Moi Kanu one-party state. Saba Saba, therefore, was and still is about the sacred and historic grounds of Kamkunji. It was not and is not just another routine street protest in Nairobi or any other town. At Kamkunji is where they held the last KAU, Kenya Africa Union meeting in 1952. It is where KANU's first rally was also held. It was also where the first Ford meeting was held after registration. Saba Saba had a singular purpose: to the repeal of Section 2A of the Constitution and allow multi-party democracy in Kenya. Saba Saba had clear and known national conveners: Kenneth Matiba, Charles Rubia, and yours truly, Raila Odingas. It was what gave birth to a bigger and powerful forum for the restoration of democracy, FORD. FORD had a known nationally inclusive leadership: Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, Philip Gachoka, Ahmed Bamariz, Salim Damwe, Asinde Muliro, George Ndenge, Kenneth Matida, Charles Rubia, among others. Saba Saba was inclusive, democratic, and intergenerational. The old, the young people in and out of the government, professionals, academics, trade unionists, civil society, women groups, and religious groups. All of them found their voice in what it stood for: a people's struggle for good governance, freedom, and equal opportunity for all. It was not one group against the entire nation. It was not community against that community, or of this age against that age. The movement stood for a peaceful and constitutional change of guard. That is the reason it focused singularly on amendment and later on the overhaul of the Constitution. These features are what made Saba Saba succeed. A year after the march, on December 2nd, 1991, President Moi capitulated. Section 2A of the Constitution was removed. Multipartyism was reinstated. We achieved our core aim, which was to return Kenya to multipartyism. Today, we have more parties than one could imagine then. That single amendment paved the way for the complete overhaul of the Constitution and the birth in 2010 of a new constitution that came with provisions for fundamental freedoms and liberties that our citizens enjoy today. It is clear that many of the ideals espoused by the dreamers behind Saba Saba have become part of the national aspiration. We are a better nation because Saba Saba happened. We have a duty and a responsibility to honor the men and women who dared to dream and to turn out at a time of great peril to themselves and their families. 35 years later, the country is grappling with a new wave of unrest and political activism. The question we have to ask ourselves is, where do we go from here? Do we embrace chaos or a coming together of minds and country? As a living architect of the events leading to the Saba Saba, I choose a coming together of minds and country in the interest of the country. I long fought for its progress, stability, and prosperity. The most important struggle taking shape in our country today is the struggle for good governance, economic opportunity, and equality. The biggest challenge facing Kenya today and into the foreseeable future is how to expand economic opportunity and lift particularly young Kenyans out of poverty, exclusion, and unemployment. Kenyans are yearning for programs and leaders that prioritize economic inclusivity, social justice, and political freedom. There is no doubt that the country is yearning for legislation that makes our institutions more responsive, programs that ensure adequate funding for services that touch wananchi, changes that make our judiciary free, efficient and progressive, measures that make the executive more accountable and efficient. We must end impunity and corruption within our three arms of government. Our leaders must become modest, ethical, humble, and accountable. What is to be done? What is to be done? I propose an inclusive, intergenerational, national conclave to hear our people across all divides and come up with irreducible reforms and changes necessary to take the country forward. I propose that the country urgently returns to the agenda of comprehensive police reforms, focusing on enhancing accountability, transparency, and improving the police-to-people relationship. Your rogue police force that shoots people with impunity. And this is a force that we inherited from the colonialists. It has not been reformed to become a people's defender, a people's servant. I propose that the conclave comes up with better and sustainable ways for addressing transparency, accountability, and impunity, especially with regard to corruption, and ensuring that leaders are held accountable for their actions. I propose that the forum comes up with a comprehensive and sustainable strategy for addressing youth unemployment and expansion of opportunities for youth in the formal and informal sectors. Such a national conclave must have clear terms of reference and be populated and helmed by the most serious and sober minds in our nation. The proceeds of the national dialogue be subjected to a referendum. I rest my case. Thank you. Long live Kenya.